right now. Let's get some thoughts on the brackets. Maybe help you fill out your bracket. Maybe help us fill out our bracket that we're going to just wing it on next hour. We bring in our guy Ryan Hammer, who brings us the trapezoid of excellence every year, which is my favorite shape to help predict the bracket. Ryan, thanks so much for hopping on with us again.
Of course. How's it going?
Going very well, and saw you drop the official final pre-tournament trapezoid yesterday. So for those of our listeners that are new to this, explain to everybody out there what is this? What are the analytics doing to lead to this, and what does it tell you?
Of course. It can definitely be confusing and overwhelming. Basically, to keep it simple, it's just something I came up with out of a random theory a while ago about basically the theory of pace and not playing too fast or too slow, and being adaptable to different styles of pace, and that being the most suitable to win the national championship. And it's worked pretty well over the last few years. So.
Yes, right this year, and we can get into these teams. There are 8 teams that have fallen within your trapezoid. How often recently has this accurately predicted among those teams who's going to win the title?
It's been 100% in the last 5 years because it uses the last 5 years of champion data to make the actual shape itself, right? So all the teams, the UConn the last 2 years, and Kansas, et cetera, that went in their championship seasons, they build the trapezoid, and that's kind of how I came up with the shape in the first place. But you never know. Things could change. The sport changes. Alabama is crazy fast and stuff, so you never know what could happen.
Yeah, looking at because the way this thing is plotted, if you look at it, it's going pace, slowest to fastest, left to right, and then it's efficiency, I think, bottom to top is how it generally plots out. Alabama's like so far off to the right with how fast they play, you like almost forget they're on the thing. It's like, whoa, there's a team way over there. All right, so let's get into the 8 teams that are in the trapezoid this year, a.k.a. the 8 most likely teams to win the national title. I'd say it's no surprise, right? It's the 4 1 seeds. It's 3 of the 2 seeds. So you've got all 4 1 seeds in Duke, Houston, Auburn, and Florida. I guess it's 2 of the 2 seeds. 2 of the 2 seeds, Tennessee and Maryland. There's a 3 seed in Texas Tech, and then go figure an 8-9 game participant in Gonzaga that the analytics love at this point this year. What is this group showing you this year?
Yeah, I mean, they show that for the most part, they're kind of built for the tournament and a tournament setting against teams that they're not used to playing, right? So, like, if you're in the middle in terms of pace, you are probably more adaptable to play against fast and slow teams. So those 8 teams are kind of built for the tournament. And like you said, there are 2 seeds and 3 seeds that aren't there or way out of there, and obviously Gonzaga in there is definitely an interesting one, and they're going to play Houston probably second round, so.
Yeah, that Houston-Gonzaga game, that would be the only matchup of teams that you have in this group of 8 that would happen before the second week of the tournament. Like, does that tell you, I mean, obviously the tournament is seeded based on different things. Does that tell you they got the seed wrong on the Zags, or is it just their metrics and their actual results this year don't exactly line up?
No, a little bit of both, I'd say. I didn't expect them to get an 8 seed. I'll tell you that much. I thought they were going to get a 7, maybe even a 6, which is kind of a shame. I would have loved to ride that wagon if they weren't getting Houston so early on in the tournament. But I think it suggests more that they're playing very well like they normally do every year. Just the results haven't been going their way. And when you look at the non-conference, even in conference, but the non-conference, when they played a few teams and they lost a couple of the games, like the UCLA game, a lot of them were within a possession or 2 possessions, and the ball just kind of wasn't falling their way. They couldn't close out games. So their analytics and metrics for the 39 minutes and 39 and a half minutes are great, but the 30 seconds gives them another loss in the loss column. So
yeah, then Houston, I mean, they're inside your trapezoid, but they're at the slower end of the pace of play, which, if anyone's watched Houston here over the last few years, no duh. Does that make them more susceptible to an upset in a game like that because they would be playing slower rather than faster?
Yeah, a little bit. Houston's tough because they're like, Houston is Houston, right? Like you said, like if you watch them all years, you know how good they are and how much they can control a game. But you also saw them play Alabama back in November, and they had a little bit of a tough time keeping up a little bit. They lost in overtime, but there is a situation where they might not be able to keep up with some of the offensive teams, but they're still in there because of the level that they're playing at. They are trying to reach that 2019 UVA like status, if you remember that, in their championship seasons.
Yes, obviously they kind of hit the perfect balance of going slow but just insanely efficiently during those years to win the title. All right, you also put out something yesterday that it did the same exercise but only used data from the last 10 games of the season, and like Duke broke the model. Basically, they were so far ahead of everybody else, but now they're also dealing with this Cooper Flagg injury and this Malik Brown injury. What is Duke showing you here? Like, are they that far ahead of the pack? Does that change with the injuries? How do you look at Duke right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely changed with the injuries a little bit, obviously, right? Like, we'd be silly not to consider those injuries, especially to Cooper Flagg, and it's really their two best defenders on their team. But no, they really have been playing at another level, and it helps that Auburn has kind of hit a skid, and a couple of the good teams have kind of hit a little bit of a skid in the last 10 games that separate them even more. Otherwise, it wouldn't be that much of a disparity. But they've been awesome, and if they were fully healthy going into this tournament, I would pick them without a doubt, but they're not, so it's tough.
Yeah, and then obviously I think they're expecting Flagg to play. Like, I don't know how much you can tell in your metrics. We know Malik Brown because he was here at Cuse the last couple of years. He is vital to what they do on defense. Like, and his injury seems to be more serious. Like, if he is out, how much does that affect, analytically what Duke looks like?
Yeah, no, it definitely affects everything a little bit. Their defense is probably going to take a little bit of a hit. I think luckily for them, their defense is amazing no matter what. In the system they play, in the athleticism and length, they still obviously Malawak is going to be relied on a little bit more, and Cooper in the front court and stuff. I wouldn't worry too much, but it's a defensive question and concern a little bit for sure.
Yeah, it does help they have that 7-2 guy at center at Malawak to clean up things when Malik Brown isn't there. Yeah. He played very, very well in the ACC tournament. Ryan Hammer, our guest of the Trapezoid of Excellence. Great follow on College Hoops on all the social medias. Ryan Hammer 09 on Twitter, on X, to get all this stuff that we're talking about with great graphs and pictures and all that stuff to really see what you're looking at. All right, so we look at the top teams. Obviously, the most fun part of bracket picking is picking the upsets early on and probably picking way too many and way more than are actually going to exist. From what your numbers look at, which games are you looking at that look more likely for upsets with either higher seeds that are maybe not as good as their seed indicates or vice versa?
Yeah, VCU BYU is a really interesting one. I think even outside a couple of things that we referenced, the three-point defense that VCU has is very, very, very high level and special, and BYU relies on spreading the ball around, balance, trying to find those open looks from range, and I think VCU is going to be able to defend that very, very well. Drake, Missouri is an interesting one because they're basically polar opposite teams, and one of them's kind of got to give, right? And I think there's a chance that either Missouri can force Drake to play too fast, or Drake can push Missouri into being uncomfortable and impatient in their offense if they're not hitting early. So that would be an interesting one. And then Michigan, UC San Diego is tough because Michigan's got 2 7-footers that UC San Diego is really going to struggle against, but it's the best turnover margin in the country versus basically the most turnover-happy power team in the entire country. So it's a massive advantage on that end for UC San Diego.
Okay, so there we go. And obviously Michigan just won the Big Ten tournament. Well, what do you make of the SEC here? 14 teams in the tournament. Has the fact that so many of them are concentrated in one league, and obviously have had a million games against each other, is that juicing the analytics differently than normal just because there are so many teams, congregated that have played each other like that?
Yeah, it might a little bit, but it's tough. Like when you out of conference slates, like Auburn's a good example. They beat Iowa State and Maui. They beat Houston. They barely lost to Duke. Like they beat Purdue handily. Like they're all playing very, very good quality teams, and they've proved it in the out of conference. I think to not worry about the majority or the general SEC as a whole. There is a sense that wow, they're so good. They beat each other up all season, and it kind of fatigues them for March, and maybe Auburn's kind of hit that skid a little too early. But there's also a team like Florida who seems to be just getting it like their best ball of the year. So it's tough. I wouldn't discredit an SEC team just because it's the SEC.
Yeah, Florida's cooking right now, man. They look fantastic here over the last month or so. I want to ask you, Ryan, about the ACC. Obviously, only 4 teams get in. Great controversy surrounding North Carolina getting in, but there's a difference, right, in deserving to be in the tournament and then what you're going to do in the tournament. So, whichever way it is for Carolina, so be it. They're in. What do Carolina's numbers show you they can accomplish here in the tournament?
Yeah, they can definitely win a game. They've been playing better actually lately than they have majority of the year. I think that's not a secret, especially defensively though. I think they've been a little bit more improved there. And then honestly, like you're asking a lot of things. Like I'm a big numbers guy, of course, stats, data, etc. Like what's actually the truth. But at the same time, like it's easy to see Carolina, quote unquote, not being deserving of getting in, winning their first 4 game, winning their first round game, and then doing some damage and being a problem because that's just the nature of March.
Yeah, I mean, there's a first 4 team. There's not one in the Sweet 16 every year, but it seems to happen more often than not. Syracuse was one a few years ago. VCU, very famously, in the first year, the first 4 made that run all the way to the Final Four. How about a team like Iowa State? You know, they're thought very highly of various analytics. They didn't make your trapezoid, but they're very close. And then some of the other Ken Palms or Bart Torviks, they're really high ranked, but they're going through an injury to their top player right now. How do you look at Iowa State in that light at this moment?
Yeah, it's tough. Keyshawn's injury is not great, obviously. I personally think, like, I remember going to Iowa State when I thought they were basically the best team in the country, if not the second or third best team in the country. Keyshawn Gilbert injury, like I said, is not great. I think their offense will be fine. Their defense is the bigger concern. But I also think, lucky for them, they have a pretty easy path. Ole Miss has not been playing well. You might get Carolina. Lipscomb is actually a pretty dangerous team to me, but I think Iowa State should be okay. And then you never know what could happen in Michigan State if they have an off shooting night like they have many times or something like that. So I think Iowa State's got a chance to do some damage even without Keyshawn Gilbert, and people aren't expecting that.
Yeah, and you mentioned Michigan State. That's the 2 seed in that bracket, where Auburn's the 1 seed. Michigan State and Alabama, they're the 2 seeds that are not in your 8 teams that are statistically likely to win the title. What is, I guess, wrong? I don't know if that's the right word. What's off about Michigan State that keeps them out of that top group?
Yeah, Michigan State's really the offense and shooting. And Jace has kind of become a go-to guy, but not for a massive chunk of the year. And as a freshman that's kind of late bloomer and stepping on, like that usually tends to not be a very good indicator for success in March. But the shooting on the full season has not been great. Last 5 games has been better, but it's still tough to rely on that in the tournament setting. And then Alabama's really that pace and really the defense too. Like they've had so many holes defensively in different times of the season that it's pretty easy to see them dropping a game at some point.
Pardon me, for some reason I keep thinking Maryland's a 2 seed. They're a 4 seed, but they're in your trapezoid because they smoked Syracuse right before Christmas. I'm like, that team's really good, and they've had their moments, right, where they've beaten the crap out of people, but they've lost a shocking amount of buzzer beater, 1-possession games. What's Maryland? I mean, this potential Florida-Maryland Sweet 16, like if it gets there, that's like a whoa, just buckle up kind of game. What kind of damage can Maryland do you think?
Yeah, no, I think Maryland's great. I think they're built for March. I think their team, they have a go-to guard. They have a 2 big mismatch problem that offers versatility. Their shooting wings are shooting the ball like crazy right now. They've gotten a little more out of their depth, which is good, and Geronimo and stuff, but I think they're well built for the tournament, in a tournament setting. The fact that they keep losing on buzzer beaters in crazy moments like that, partially is because of them, like the Michigan game. Like they shouldn't let Trey Donaldson walk down the floor, but part of it is also because they're great and they can beat anybody, and they probably should beat anybody and everybody. So them as a 4 seed is dangerous. Florida is a great matchup both ways. Like they're going to match up well against Florida, better than most teams in the country. But Florida is also Florida, and it's going to match up well against them.
Yeah, Florida's looked fantastic of late. How about UConn? 8 seed. Obviously, they won the last 2 titles. They're not quite there this year. What is UConn right now? Because they obviously have the title pedigree. What do you make of what they can possibly do? Which would be, running into Florida in the second round more likely than not if they win their first game.
Yeah, it's obviously not ideal, but that's how they've been playing this year, and they deserve an 8 seed or 9 seed, so they're in that game for a reason. Really, their defense has not been there. They've been super inconsistent. I think their lack of depth and quality in the front court has kind of really been a big problem for their defense. And to be fair, it's March, and Dan Hurley is no stranger to the month of March in the tournament. So, and they do have quality on their team, and they have some experience. So you never know what could happen. Florida's not an ideal matchup, but you never know. Dan Hurley could just outcoach Golden.
Yeah, and Dan Hurley's not afraid to let you know about that if that he's willing to do that. All right, Ryan, before we let you go, we know who's in the trapezoid. Do you have a personal favorite out of that group? Have you made a title pick here for this year?
Every time I look at it, I find it so hard to not pick Florida. I think their region and their path is so tough, like we talked about, UConn, Maryland, etc. But You got to beat the best to be the best, and if they're going to win a national championship, they're going to have to clean through everybody anyway. I find it really hard to go against Florida right now, but we'll see. I don't know.
Okay, Florida, one of the 1 seeds, and yeah, realistically, they've been playing as good or better than anyone else in the country, at least for the last month or so. All right, Ryan, really appreciate the time. I suggest anyone check you out on social media where all your stuff is at. Great stuff, and hopefully this will help people with their brackets, but thanks so much.
Of course, thanks for having me.
All right, Ryan Hammer, check him out on Twitter, RyanHammer09, the Trapezoid of Excellence. It's a fantastic geometric shape to pick your bracket on. 8 teams in it, and the last 5 years, the winner of the tournament has come from the trapezoid. This year, it's Duke, Houston, Tennessee, Texas Tech, Maryland, Gonzaga, Florida, and Auburn. You got 4 1 seeds. You got a 2 seed in Tennessee, a 3 seed in Texas Tech, a 4 seed in Maryland, and an 8 seed in the Zags as your options to cut down the nets this year. With that, we will take a break. A reminder,